8 out of 19. That's how many bottled water brands actually passed. We tested water from Walmart, Costco, Target, Aldi, and 19 more stores. And what we found wasn't just disappointing, it was disturbing. Arsenic near federal limits. Forever chemicals linked to cancer. Microplastics in nearly every single bottle. This isn't speculation, it's based on recall records, independent lab testing, and published scientific studies. We're ranking these brands from the weakest to the worst offender, and then showing you the 8 that actually earned your trust. Before we open the first bottle, like this video, subscribe if you want more honest breakdowns, and share it with one person who still believes a pretty label means clean water. Because bottled water is supposed to be the easy choice. You are in a rush. You are at the airport, the gym, the grocery store, the gas station. You do not want sugar. You do not want soda. You just want water. Clean, simple, safe. That is the promise. And that promise is exactly why this topic matters so much. Most people never stand in the water aisle and feel confused. They feel reassured. Snowy mountains, green forests, glass bottles. Words like natural, pure, artesian, spring, mineral, alkaline. Everything about the packaging is designed to calm you down. It tells you not to worry. It tells you the hard part is already handled. Just pick a bottle, twist the cap, and move on with your day. But the second we started looking beyond the label, the story changed. We pulled popular water brands from stores like Walmart, Costco, Target, Aldi, Whole Foods, and other national chains. Then compared those brands against recall records, source disclosures, independent investigations, and published scientific studies on contaminants like PFAS, arsenic, and microplastics. And the same ugly pattern kept showing up. The image on the bottle was often doing far more work than the water inside it. Some brands were tied to legal fights over how they described their source. Some showed up in testing linked to forever chemicals. Some had troubling recall histories. Some were not spring water at all, even though they were sold with the mood and pricing of something rare and untouched. And once you see that pattern, it becomes very hard to unsee. So this is not just a ranking, it is a reality check. We are going from the weaker buys to the strongest ones, and by the end, you will know which bottles seem to cost more for the story than for the quality, and which ones at least give you a more solid reason to spend your money. Let's start with a brand that perfectly captures the bottled water illusion. Number 11, Arrowhead. Arrowhead sells a feeling before it sells a drink. The name sounds natural. The design looks cold and clean. It wants you to picture protected mountain springs and untouched land. But that comforting image has not stopped the brand from facing scrutiny. The bigger issue is not one headline by itself. It is the gap between what the packaging suggests and what consumers later learn when they dig deeper. Add the wider microplastics conversation around bottled water, and the shine starts to wear off fast. The bottle says wilderness. The questions around it say something else. Number 10, AQUA. AQUA is a different kind of case because it is sparkling water and many people treat it as the harmless, smarter replacement for soda. That is part of why it belongs in this conversation. A healthier image can create the same false sense of safety as a mountain label. Independent testing has raised PFAS concerns around some sparkling waters, and once a brand enters that conversation, the burden shifts. It is no longer enough to say the levels are low. People want to know why any amount showed up at all, what standards are being used, and whether the rules are even strong enough yet. A fun can and trendy image do not answer those questions. Number 9, Deer Park. Then there is Deer Park, one of those names people grew up with. It sounds local, calm, almost old-fashioned in a good way. The kind of bottle you grab without thinking because it feels familiar. But familiarity is not proof. Some independent testing has placed Deer Park in the same broader PFAS discussion that hit other mainstream brands. And that matters because these are not chemicals people want to casually collect in their bodies year after year. When a trusted legacy brand shows up in that kind of conversation, the comfort people feel around it suddenly looks more emotional than factual. Number 8, Poland Spring. Poland Spring hits even harder because trust is the whole product. The brand has spent years selling Maine as much as water. Forest, springs, clean northern air, family refrigerators, road trips, school lunches. It is not just a beverage, it is a picture of safety. But when lawsuits challenge whether a spring water label really tells the full truth, that picture cracks. Add contamination concerns from outside testing, and the problem grows. Because at that point, consumers are not just asking whether the water is clean. They are asking whether the story itself was carefully engineered to stop them from asking harder questions. And that is the pattern you need to notice early, because it only gets louder from here. The issue is not just contamination. The issue is confidence. These brands do not merely sell water. They sell relief. They sell simplicity. They sell the idea that somebody else already checked everything for you. The moment that trust weakens, the entire premium starts looking shaky. Number 7. Aquafina. Aquafina is where many people first realize how much of bottled water is branding. For years, huge numbers of buyers assumed Aquafina came from some special natural source. It did not. Aquafina is purified public water. That means the source starts the same way tap water does before it goes through additional treatment. To be clear, treatment itself is not the scandal. Plenty of processed water can be safe. The issue is the illusion. People were paying for a feeling of distance from the tap, when in reality the product began there. Now add the microplastics problem. Research published by scientists at Columbia found enormous numbers of tiny plastic particles in bottled water, often far beyond what consumers would expect. Once bottled water becomes a plastic delivery system as much as a hydration product, the old marketing language starts to sound hollow. If the bottle begins as tap and may also carry plastic particles, then what exactly was the premium really buying? Number 6. Perrier. Perrier is painful for a different reason. It has prestige. It has history. It has that restaurant table reputation that makes people feel they are choosing something elevated. But heritage is not immunity. Perrier's old benzene scandal still matters because it showed the world that even a famous, polished, internationally respected water brand could face a serious contamination crisis. When a product becomes iconic, consumers often assume it must also be rigorously safe. Yet brand status and actual purity are not the same thing. They never were. Number 5. Mountain Valley Spring Water. Mountain Valley Spring Water is the kind of brand that looks almost too good to question. Glass bottle, premium price, old American heritage. It feels like the careful shopper's answer, the kind of water chosen by people who read labels and try to avoid junk. That is exactly why concerns around lawsuits and contamination allegations hit so hard here. The whole point of paying extra is to lower risk, not discover that the expensive bottle may carry problems of its own. Premium packaging can hide weak transparency just as easily as cheap plastic can. Number 4. Dasani. Dasani sits in a similar lane to Aquafina, but it creates a slightly different illusion. It looks crisp and stripped down like the cleanest possible modern water. Yet Dasani is also treated water from public sources, with minerals added back in for taste. Again, that does not automatically make it dangerous. But consumers deserve to know what they are buying without having to decode the fine print. And Dasani's history includes a damaging recall episode in the United Kingdom over bromate concerns, which still lingers over the brand years later. When people hear purified, they imagine simple. When the real story is industrial processing plus recall baggage, simple is not the right word. What makes these middle-tier brands so effective is that they rarely look reckless. They look normal. They look convenient. They look like the sensible choice during a busy day. That is why so many people never question them. The danger is not that every bottle looks suspicious. The danger is that the most questionable ones often look the most ordinary. They hide inside routine. A quick stop at a vending machine. A case tossed into a cart. A bottle handed to a child after practice. No drama. No warning. Just habit. And habit is where weak products do their best work, because routine lowers your guard faster than any ad campaign ever could. If you are still watching, tap subscribe right now and hit like, because the biggest surprises are still ahead, and the safer picks are coming in just a minute. Number 3. Fiji. Fiji might be the best example of luxury doing emotional heavy lifting. The square bottle, the tropical flower, the remote island story. It is one of the few waters that manages to feel glamorous without even trying. People do not just buy Fiji for hydration. They buy the fantasy of distance. Distance from cities, pipes, factories, noise, and ordinary life. But that fantasy has been dented by recall issues and legal pressure, and the distance itself raises another question. What happens when water travels thousands of miles in plastic before it reaches your hand? Heat, storage, transport time, and packaging are not tiny details. They are part of the product. Number 2, Topo Chico. Then comes Topo Chico, and this one stings because the loyalty is real. People love Topo Chico. They love the bite, the glass bottle, the ritual of opening it, the whole identity around it. It became the sparkling water people defended with actual passion. So when independent testing placed it at the top of the PFAS list in one of the most talked about investigations, it hit like a betrayal. Not because one reading ends the conversation forever, but because it shattered the belief that beloved automatically means better. Topo Chico later reduced those levels, which matters, but the moment still revealed something important. Devotion is not quality control. Number 1, Starkey. And then we reach Starkey, the brand that makes this entire discussion feel personal. Starkey was sold inside Whole Foods, a store built around the language of better choices. Better ingredients, better sourcing, better living, better for your family, better for your body. So when testing and recall history placed Starkey in the arsenic conversation in a serious way, it cut deeper than a normal product disappointment. It suggested that even the people trying hardest to shop carefully could still be guided straight toward a product carrying the exact kind of risk they thought they were paying to avoid. That is what makes this more than a consumer list. It is a trust story. Because once we stacked these weaker performers side by side, the same themes kept repeating. Beautiful natural language, complicated sourcing, limited transparency, plastic exposure, brand confidence outrunning hard evidence. The water aisle looked less like a clean health section and more like a masterclass in emotional marketing. And now the obvious question becomes unavoidable. If so many familiar names come with baggage, then what should you buy instead? This is where the conversation finally gets useful. 1. Essentia. Essentia does not lean as heavily on romantic scenery or untouched nature. Its pitch is process, purification, filtration, measurable consistency. That may sound less inspiring, but honestly, it is one of the reasons the brand stands out. When a company leads with treatment steps and published quality information instead of vague purity language, it is giving you something concrete to evaluate. It is not magic water. It is carefully processed water that at least tries to argue with data instead of mood. 2. Proud Source. Proud Source deserves attention for another reason entirely: the bottle. It uses aluminum instead of plastic, and that matters more than most shoppers realize. After years of learning that plastic packaging itself may contribute to contamination concerns, container choice stops being a side note. It becomes part of the safety discussion. Proud Source is not perfect, and no brand is, but removing one of the biggest recurring problems from the equation gives it a meaningful edge. 3. Flow. Flow takes a similar packaging lesson and applies it differently. Its carton approach is not just a branding stunt. It speaks to a bigger point. When the industry keeps getting pulled into microplastics conversations, brands that move away from traditional plastic deserve a closer look. Packaging does not tell you everything about water quality, but it absolutely tells you something about risk design. If one of the most common worries is coming from the bottle itself, then smarter packaging is a real advantage, not a trendy extra. 4. Waiākea. Waiākea stands out because it offers a more layered story than simple luxury. The brand is built around Hawaiian volcanic water, natural minerals, and a broader sustainability identity. Some buyers love that. Some roll their eyes at it. Fair enough. What matters is whether the core source story holds up better than the average fantasy label. Volcanic filtration, lower industrial pressure around the source, and a brand image tied to environmental accountability give Waiākea a stronger case than many premium competitors. Not because it sounds exotic, but because the claim is more specific and easier to examine. 5. S.Pellegrino. S.Pellegrino earns its place because, unlike some prestige brands, its image has had support from independent testing rather than being regularly embarrassed by it. That is a big difference. A glass bottle, a long-monitored source, and lower concerns in major microplastics comparisons make it one of the few upscale names that does not immediately trigger the same distrust reaction after you review the broader evidence. Fancy alone is meaningless. Fancy that survives scrutiny is much rarer. 6. Voss. Voss works for similar reasons. It uses glass in many of its most recognizable bottles, leans on a lower industrial source image, and has generally held a cleaner reputation than many mass-market rivals. Again, that does not mean sainthood. It means fewer obvious red flags in the areas that kept sinking other brands. When the whole market is crowded with romance and weak transparency, a brand that simply avoids several recurring problems starts to look unusually strong. 7. AQUA Carpatica. AQUA Carpatica is one of the more interesting picks because its claim is not just broad purity. It focuses on naturally low nitrate levels, and that kind of specific claim is helpful. Specific claims can be checked. Vague claims are much easier to hide behind. If a water brand can point to one clear measurable advantage instead of asking you to feel impressed by scenery, that is a better sign. 8. Icelandic Glacial. And then there is Icelandic Glacial, which consistently lands near the top whenever people start comparing bottled water sources with a more critical eye. The appeal is obvious. Iceland, cold climate, remote source, naturally filtered water. But what helps it stand out is that the clean image is not carrying the whole case by itself. Its reputation has been reinforced by the broader conversation around source quality and lower contamination concerns. In a market full of bottles that sound pure and turn messy under inspection, Icelandic Glacial keeps showing up as one of the names people feel least nervous recommending. Now, let's slow down for 1 second, because this is where a lot of water conversations go wrong. A better bottle is not a miracle. No bottled water brand should be treated like a health halo. Not the premium glass one, not the influencer favorite, not the store brand bargain option, and not the bottle with the most beautiful mountain range ever printed on plastic. The smart move is not blind trust in a new favorite. The smart move is learning what actually separates a stronger option from a weaker one. Here is what mattered most in this breakdown. First, source honesty matters. If a company is selling processed public water, it should say that clearly and not wrap it in a natural fantasy. There is nothing wrong with treated water if it is clean and transparent. The problem is the theatrical packaging that tries to create a false mental picture. Second, packaging matters more than people think. If science keeps raising alarms around tiny plastic particles in bottled water, then the bottle itself cannot be treated as neutral. Glass, aluminum, and carton alternatives are not automatically perfect, but they at least respond to a problem that many companies still act like consumers should ignore. Third, recall history matters. A recall does not always mean a brand is permanently terrible, but it absolutely tells you the product does not deserve blind trust. If a company has had serious contamination or quality control issues before, that should stay part of the conversation. Fourth, specificity matters. Words like pure and natural are emotional shortcuts. They sound nice. They mean less than people think. More specific details about source, testing, treatment, or measurable contaminants tell you far more than dreamy branding ever will. Quick pause before we finish strong. If this video is saving you time, send it to your family group chat, tap like and subscribe so you do not miss the next investigation. One label can mislead one person. One shared video can help a lot more. Now let's talk about the bigger twist in all of this. In many parts of the United States, your tap water is regulated more aggressively than the bottled water sold beside it. That sounds backward, but the rule gap is real. Public water systems face ongoing monitoring and reporting obligations that ordinary shoppers can actually look up. Bottled water lives in a different world. The oversight is split. The standards do not always line up cleanly, and some contaminants sit in regulatory gray zones that companies can hide behind while still sounding perfectly wholesome in ads. That does not mean tap water is always better. Some cities have serious water problems, and people have good reasons to use filters or avoid local supplies. But it does mean bottled water should never get an automatic trust bonus just because it comes in a sealed container with a high price. And honestly, that may be the most important takeaway of this whole video. The battle is not tap versus bottle. The battle is evidence versus image. One more favor before we bring this home. If you know someone who buys water by habit, share this video with them. Subscribe for the next breakdown, and leave a comment with the brand you are rethinking after this. That is why so many people get fooled. We assume expensive means tested harder. We assume natural means cleaner. We assume premium means safer. But over and over, the bottled water market shows that price, aesthetics, and peace of mind can be manufactured much faster than actual transparency. Think about how often people say, "I only drink bottled water," as if that sentence explains everything. It does not. It explains almost nothing. Bottled water is not one thing. It is a category filled with very different sources, very different processing methods, very different packaging designs, and very different levels of honesty. One bottle may be carefully filtered, clearly labeled, and relatively low risk. Another may be glorified tap in plastic. Another may be tied to lawsuits over what it really is. Another may carry a contamination story most of its customers never heard. And from the outside, those bottles can look almost equally reassuring. That is why this issue matters beyond water. It teaches a bigger lesson about modern consumer trust. Companies know that most people do not have time to investigate everything they buy, so the label has to do the emotional work fast. The font, the colors, the words, the shape of the bottle, the hints of forests and glaciers and springs. The entire design is built to quiet your skepticism before it fully wakes up. Once you see that, you start shopping differently. You stop asking, which one looks healthiest? You start asking, what can this brand actually prove? You stop being impressed by vague purity language. You start noticing whether the company publishes real quality information. You stop assuming the expensive bottle is the careful choice. You start checking whether the premium is based on evidence or on mood. And that shift matters, because bottled water is something people buy again and again and again. Small bad assumptions repeated daily can become a long habit. So can better ones. If you want the shortest possible version of this video, here it is. Do not pay mainly for the fantasy. Be cautious with brands built more on image than transparency. Be extra skeptical of plastic-heavy products sold as luxury purity. Treat recall history like a warning, not trivia. Look more seriously at brands that publish useful quality details. And when possible, choose packaging that does not deepen the very problem people are trying to escape. So where do we land? The weaker buys in this group were not weak because one scary word appeared in one article. They were weak because too many warning signs stacked together. Questionable source storytelling, contamination concerns, recall records, plastic worries, vague labeling, a premium built on emotion instead of clarity. The stronger buys were not perfect angels. They simply gave us better reasons to trust them. More transparency, smarter packaging, better source logic, cleaner reputations in the areas that kept hurting other brands. That is a huge difference. And if you are standing in a store tomorrow with a cooler full of bottles in front of you, that difference is the whole game. Because the bottle in your hand is not just water. It is a claim about where it came from, a claim about how it was handled, a claim about what is not inside, a claim about whether the company expects you to check. Ask what is actually being proven. Ask what the container adds to the equation. Ask whether the company is giving you facts or just feelings. Ask whether you are paying for water or paying to stop worrying. Because the most expensive mistake in that aisle is not overspending by $1. It is thinking the branding already did the homework for you. And once you realize that, you will never look at the water shelf the same way again.